Welcome to Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I'm Paula Eddy Wilcox, and today is the third episode with our wonderful guest who is talking about the pivotal moments that make them the leader they are today. I really hope you enjoy the episode. I can't wait to find out what's in store. Welcome to this week's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I am already grinning from ear to ear and laughing because I know what I'm in for with the fabulous Dani Wallace, the Queen Bee, who has come back to join us for her third, and I say final, only for now, episode for this series. And thank you, Dani. It's a pleasure to have you back.
I have had the most fun on these podcasts. I thank you so much for having me back again.
Oh, I'm so glad. And the big benefit for everybody is they get to benefit from the fun that we're having. So let's laugh on and share the love. Oh, goodness me. So great to see you. I hope you've had a good week in between. Now, today we're going to be looking at pivotal moments. And from what I know of you, Dani, you've had a very, colourful and interesting life. And I know there'll be lots of moments in there to share in terms of what makes you the fantastic leader you are today and helps you show up, wise up and rise up.
Well, do you know what? It's taken quite some time to appreciate the colourfulness of life and everything that it's brought. And the way that I work with people that I work with now within my speaking business is that I explore with them everything that has happened to and for them. So we often go through life and things, will be served curveballs or things will happen and we think, oh God, why is this happening to me? And actually, my story is deeply rooted and centered in understanding when things are happening for me, even if they don't feel fair, even if they feel more difficult than they possibly could or would or should be, particularly when I was a kid. But actually, at this point in my life now where I'm just pulling up at 40, realizing that every single thing that has ever happened to me has happened for me. Now, it's not the glorification of trauma, by the way. I just want to say that on the top end of our conversation today, that you don't have to have had things happen to you in order for you to be successful, in order for you to be a good leader. But curveballs that you are served throughout your life, there is a necessity, I think, for good leaders to see where the learning is to be had within those. And I'm really excited to explore that with you today.
Oh, I love that, Dani, because I do a lot of work with people on connecting with their purpose. And some of that is looking at what if you think about a crucible moment, a moment where all this stuff goes into the pot and actually come out changed the other side, right? Yeah. So, how does your strengths show up to get you out of that challenging time, whatever that might have been? So what you're describing there resonates with me massively, because that's, what I help people to do, to discover, it's not that you've never had it. You've always had your purpose, but you might not know what it is. You haven't connected with it yet. So you get to connect with it. You get to decide what your strengths are, what your passions are, and then you get to decide what you do with all of that.
Right.
And it's fascinating stuff, and it's a real privilege to be able to help people do that.
I love that idea of crucible moments. That I remember being at school in science lesson in chemistry with that crucible, and particularly with something like magnesium, right? We would light the magnesium and it would be incendiary, and it would be this white light, and on the other side you'd end up with this different chemical compound. And that, as we kind of go into our conversation today, there are definite pivotal moments for me where that has been the case, where through the other side of these very distinct moments, and I talk about these particular moments that we're going to talk about today in pretty much all of my talks on purpose, because they were the click in the lock moments. They were the bits that felt right up until that point that there was going to be nothing after.
Yeah.
But actually, once they had occurred, that through the other side of it, I was completely different. So I'm really excited to have this chat with you today.
Oh, fabulous. Well, look, without further ado, as they say, let's dig into it. Come on,
Got me space.
let's
Get
go.
comfortable. Hang on, we have a shift in my
Get yourself comfortable. Let's go.
So pivotal moments then is what we're talking about today, is times that have been massive catalysts for change. And if anybody doesn't know about my experience, I always talk, when I say that out of my mouth, I just realize how really big-headed that sounds. Like, do you not know who I am? Have you not heard my story?
Well, honestly, everybody in the world should know who you are, Dani. I mean, how dare they not know?
I'm famous, I have you know. In my own bedroom.
I love it.
This is a side joke. So one of the things that I talk about when it comes to taking up space in the world, one of the things that I do is that I tell people in the room, I'll whisper in their ears, I don't tell anybody that I'm famous. And they'll go, are you really? And I'll go, yeah, but don't tell anybody, because I don't want to kind of give it away. And they'll go, you're famous. And then all of a sudden they'll go back to their friends and they'll go, she's famous over there, you know. And then all of a sudden everybody in the room thinks I'm famous, and it's just done the work for me. I don't have to do any more work than that. They go and check me out. I'll give her a follow. She's famous.
I absolutely love it. Can I just say, if there's one thing people need to know about you, is how unbig-headed or anything like that you are. You are just so grounded, so fabulous, and so beautiful inside and out. I just, I want people to know that, if they're not looking at us on screen and they're only listening. But I hope that comes across on both.
But I am famous though, Paula. Let's
you are. Don't tell anyone. You are famous. You're in my world anyway.
All right. So pivotal moments, shall I share with you?
Yeah, please do.
So I grew up on the council estates of Preston, and I am very proud of where I come from. One of the things that I found, being from the community that I was from, for anybody that doesn't know, by the way, if you're listening, like internationally, or not sure what a council estate is, a council estate tends to be sort of generically government funded areas of housing that offer affordable housing, accessible schools and things like that for people who maybe cannot afford private schooling or mortgages and things like that. So inherently, as a community, we were living on the breadline. As a family, we were living on the breadline. In the previous podcast, in last week's podcast, we was talking about generational change and stopping the oncoming train of generations of, for me, poverty, domestic abuse, addiction, inherent misogyny, a lot of weight being on women, particularly to be not only the caregivers but the providers, and that was a real heavy burden to bear. So the things that I were exposed to as a child were things like addiction, were things like domestic abuse, and not just for my mum and dad. It was aunties, uncles, cousins, friends, family, nanas, granddads, their nanas, their granddads. It went back a long way and went side to side a long way. So by the time it got to me, it was the only thing that me and my sister particularly knew. We thought, we knew it wasn't right, because the conversation, now this is the early 90s to mid 90s, we knew that this wasn't right. The conversation around things like mental health, addiction and things like that had just begun. And we knew that it wasn't healthy, the situation that we was in. And I remember being about 13 and 14 and being sat with my sister. We were sat in her room, because I would go into her room when everyone was fighting downstairs. I'd go into her room just to feel safe. And I remember I was sat on the bed. I don't know if you ever sat like this, but I was sat on the bed. You imagine, I was like 13. I've got my nightie pulled over my knees like that. I'm just sat on the bed. Yeah. And my sister sat like up near the pillows, and we're looking at each other. And she says, when we get older, Dan, we're going to do something that will help people like us not experience what we're having to experience right now. And I remember really having that conversation with her. We were kids, we were just kids, 13, 14. There's only a year between me and my sister. And I thought no more really of that conversation until many years later. So what happened when I was 16 was essentially I ran away with the circus, and I found that I could sing. I found that actually performance was a really great escape for me, and found that it was a quick get out of that really chaotic way of growing up and go and create my chaos elsewhere. Like, I'm Hurricane Dani. I'm going to go and create my own chaos somewhere else. So I fibbed about my age. Don't tell anybody. It's a long time ago. And went to go and work in different hotels on different entertainment teams, animation teams abroad. But it wasn't a proper job. So I would go away and I'd be working all of the hours God sent. I would be singing in the daytime or doing activities in the daytime and then singing in the nighttime and drinking and smoking my way through the evenings. Found myself in a position where I was really heavily reliant on alcohol and validation from outside of myself. And eventually I met this guy when I wasn't abroad. I come back to the UK, but I was a blue coat at Pontins.
Oh,
and
you'd arrived.
Mate, if it's good enough for Shane Ritchie, it's good enough for me. And so I'd come to be back close to my grandma, who was knocking on in age, and I was like, right, well, Southport and Preston not that far away from each other. I'll be a blue coat. So I met this guy when I was there, and in my mind, what I wanted to do was create stability and security. So in my mind, that was a husband, a house, a child, and a job. Those 4 things. So I came back and got a proper job in a contact center, was talent managed through working within a contact center. Found that because I was good on stage, I was also really good at training and teaching as well. So I'm a clever stick. Got myself engaged. When I say got myself engaged, what I did is I asked him to marry me and he said yes, because Hurricane Dani. We had a baby. And one morning he just woke up and he said, Dan, I don't want any of this. I don't want the wedding. I don't want a house. I don't want to be a family. Like I don't feel ready for any of this. And he just left. So I'd sort of geared myself up in my mind for this perfection amidst a whole past that would tell me that perfection was never going to be mine. Tried to orchestrate it. And when I did try and orchestrate it, it just all fell through my fingers. And that left me feeling really vulnerable. So here I was, I had this house, this mortgage, this baby, this job, and everyone thought things were really good, like on the surface, because it was my job to give off this very slick, very professional veneer to the world. And underneath, my life was in tatters. I was feeling very vulnerable. And often when you're feeling very vulnerable, you can become prey to people who are perpetrators of domestic abuse. And also, it was all I knew. So the man who felt safest to me was actually a man who was really, really toxic. And so very quickly, I got into another relationship with this guy. Very quickly, that relationship turned violent. We needed untangling by the courts and the police and stuff. And very quickly after that, I ended up homeless with my 2 kids under the age of 3, while still, Paula, holding on for dear life to this bloody job. But it was the only validation that I could get, that I'm still clever. I can still, earn an okay wage, but all of my wage was being sucked up by nursery fees to keep things stable for the kids. So we're going food banks and ended up sofa surfing and things like that. And at work, everybody thought everything was okay. And actually, again, underneath, things were really, really difficult. And I'm working out of Acton in London 2 days out of the week. The kids would stay with my mum. I was working out of Warrington another day. Kids would stay with my sister. I would then be at home and we'd stay between friends' houses. And one night, I realised that I was the common denominator in everybody's bother. I was the burden that everybody was carrying. It was nobody else but me. And I didn't feel like I could make a good decision to save my life. Like, Dani, every decision that you've made has brought you to this point. And I was going down to London that night, and it was nighttime. I was going to drive through the night so that I didn't have to stay anywhere, work out of London, and then drive back the next day. And I took the kids into bed and I gave them a kiss, and then I sat in the car, and it's raining outside, and it's there must have been a really rubbish like 80s ballad playing on. I was feeling quite emotional. It's raining outside, the windscreen wipers are on, and I'm holding onto the steering wheel and I'm crying because I didn't know if I'd just kissed my kids goodbye or goodnight. I didn't know if I was going to drive off and not come back, because I felt like that was the easiest thing for everybody attached to me, is that Hurricane Dani was wreaking havoc on everybody, was throwing everybody out, was making everybody's life miserable, not least which of that my kids. And in that moment, if we talk about pivotal moments, this was really that pivotal moment where I had to decide that either life was going to continue to happen to me or I was going to happen to life. If every decision that I had ever made had brought me to this point, then it must mean that I have an opportunity to make decisions to the alternative. And I had to choose in that moment to live. I had to choose in that moment to take responsibility. This isn't victim blaming, by the way. If anybody has experienced domestic abuse or whatever, you know, it is not your fault. Like, I want to really categorically 100% make that unequivocal for anybody listening. If anyone experiences that, it is not your fault. But for me, in that moment of self-awareness, in that moment of generic safety, I didn't have a perpetrator in that moment. That every decision had brought me to that point. So every decision was either going to put me under or put me over. And I decided the latter. So the thing that I wasn't doing was asking for help, was telling people how I really felt, was telling people my real situation. I was trying to hide everything through shame. I was so ashamed of my whole thing, of where I was, of what I'd done and everything. And so the first thing that I needed to do was ask for help. The second thing that I needed to do was surround myself with better people. And it was from there then that I started to claw my way back. And that was, you know, that was really that moment.
Wow, that's so powerful, Dani. And I'm not sure I know how to respond other than, you know, what a fantastic story in terms of the strengths that you found, and absolutely that real crucible moment for you, because what came in versus what came out, where you made that decision that actually I'm going to take life by the balls and I'm going to take control and not have it happen to me. I'm going to take part and I'm going to orchestrate all those parts for myself. And, you know, if I think about it, I guess in leadership terms, it's that victim versus player kind of mentality. If you've heard of that before, in that, you know, and it sort of ties into fixed and growth mindset. There's so many different sort of connotations of it. And being able to recognize that in yourself and being able to do something about it really shows an incredible inner strength.
I think it came back to the fact that if I was to do anything to myself, then that was a really shitty stick that I was going to pass to my children to then deal with. And I'd already been passed enough shitty sticks, and I didn't want to be guilty of passing that, say, here, this is the thing that you've now got to deal with because of another decision that I'd made. And taking back that sort of ownership and responsibility for myself and that of my kids to say, actually, no, I'm not tapping out. Now is not the time to tap out. And there's this quote that a few years later, once I'd, you know, started to build myself out of that situation and got into a place of safety and what have you, I was watching the B movie, Paula, which is, it's a kids' DreamWorks film.
Yeah, of course.
But there's this quote at the beginning that really did sort of change the way that I thought forever. And it goes like, I'm paraphrasing, it's aerodynamically, bees should not be able to fly. Their little wings shouldn't get their fat little bodies off the ground. Bees, however, don't care what humans think is impossible. The bee flies anyway. And I clutched my pearls because I was like, well, that's it. That everybody around me thinks that success for me is impossible because of where I come from, because of how I am. You know, I'm an excitable little puppy and I'm dead excited. I'm the Tigger to anybody's Eeyore any day of the week. Success isn't meant for somebody like me. I was going to bounce my way through life, end up an addict, end up, you know, and I did for a while, but end up being addicted to something and just run my way into the ground. It's certainly what my dad did. Certainly what, you know, his parents did was run themselves into the ground through their own lack of self-awareness and the lack of thinking outside of themselves. And actually, when I started to do that, I was able to start to build something that was really meaningful. And in sharing that story, I found the power of sharing that story was really impactful to other people. And it was there that I started to build this incredible community. So when people say, Dani, why's your business called I Am the Queen Bee? Why are you the Queen Bee, Dani? And I'm like, it has nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I'm declaring myself royalty, and everything to do with the fact that it is everybody's birthright as a child of God, or however you want to look at it, as somebody who's been put on this earth for a finite period of time, it is everybody's birthright to have success, health, wealth, happiness, contentment as a bar, as a, you know, just as the bar to be set, contentment, being happy, having something to work for. You know, if we look at the US Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is our basic inalienable rights. So once I started to pursue that and share with people that that's what I was pursuing, that became compelling. And therefore, it was within that space that I found where my leadership angle was, that we are deserving as a wider community of people who know each other, who have come across each other in this weird, strange set of scientific happenings that have enabled life on this planet for whatever reason, for whatever period of time. But we have this a moment of consciousness together where we can all do well when we all do well. And that is what I sunk my teeth into. And therefore, we created the IATQB community, started things like Be Inspired, which is the event that I put on twice a year where people take to the stage, and created the Flying Away Foundation, where now everything's come full circle. And the story I was telling you about my sister, maybe is sat on the bed saying, we'll help. Now we help people who have experienced domestic abuse build businesses because business saved my life. And, you know, owning those pivotal moments and allowing them to be the catapult to everything that I want to create has been absolutely pivotal.
God, this is just phenomenal stuff, Dani. And I know you're not telling me for phenomenal factor at all.
I'm just telling you what happened.
You know, what I'm taking away from this is we all deserve that happiness. Doesn't matter where we come from or what shitty stick has been served to us in the past. We have the power to make that change. We've just got to make sure we surround ourselves with those right supporters, you know, take away that toxicity and, you know, find our tribe that are going to help us rise up and help us get through those times. And we do all go through them in different ways. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing, you know, your story and what you've been through and how you got through it. Because, you know, even if our conversation today only inspires 2 people, it'll inspire many more than that. But even if it only inspired 1 or 2 people, it would have been worth it. Because what a difference that can make when you choose to change your circumstances for you.
Yeah, look, I decided to change my circumstances for me, and I have an audience of over 50,000 people now, and daily I get messages saying, oh, Dani, you know, you've inspired me, I've changed my life, I've handed my notice in at work, I've created this business, I've started to speak, I have generated this for myself, I'm having better conversations with my husband, I'm talking to my kids more, I'm deciding for me. Mate, it's very powerful when you start to hold on to that for yourself, and then you become like a little lighthouse, because other people will look over at you, go, oh, is that a thing we can do? Can we do that? And the answer is absolutely, hell yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do it for yourself. It takes courage. But, you know, if you've got the right people around you, that community that you've built that are telling you that you can, it doesn't take long before that self-belief starts to kick in and you truly believe you can. And as soon as you believe you can, trust me, you will.
And surround yourself with the people whose belief that you can borrow. Like if you don't have it, like I didn't, I was scared. I do everything scared. People go, Dani, you're so courageous. You're so brave. You're so confident. No, I'm not. I just do it because I'm scared and I don't want anyone else to feel like I felt. But doing it scared and still doing it anyway is the best things that I ever did.
It is. It's feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Right? It feels glib. It feels cliche, but there's truth in the cliche because it works.
Absolutely right. It is a cheesy thing to say, but it's so true. And it really does make a difference to you and your life. And you've got that opportunity, as we started way back in our first episode together, talking about, you know, your leadership journey and talking about, you know, in its most sort of basic foundation, we're leading ourselves.
Right. And
learning to do that takes time and takes the right kind of support. Oh my God, I'm all goosey again.
Yeah, that effect on you, Paula.
You do. It's such an inspiration and so motivating, Dani, that I feel like I'll spring out of bed in a different way tomorrow morning. I know will happen just as a result of chatting to you one-on-one, because, you know, normally I'm watching you speak at some big event and we snatch a little moment to say hi and whatever.
Get in with a quick cuddle.
Yeah, exactly. A quick cuddle. Absolutely. You give the best cuddles.
I love a cuddle. I'm a cuddler.
So, you know, to be able to chat to you and really get underneath your story and how you show up as the amazing leader you are today has truly been an absolute honour. And I hope that you'll come back and see us again in the not too distant future.
Oh, Paula, that would be lovely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute scream doing these last 3 episodes with you, and I can't wait to see what you are thinking about these conversations at home. Please do let Paula know how you found these episodes for us together, because I've loved them. I've loved them. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, we would absolutely love to hear, again, what's resonated most for all of you, and what are you finding is going to help you most, or what's inspired you to make that change for you. Remember, as hard and out of reach as it might feel, if you've got that right support around you, and as Dani just hit the nail on the head again, you can borrow that belief from somebody else and it will just give you that little spark you need to get going. And once you've got going, you'll start to taste what it feels like in a different way to take back that control for you and start running your life on your terms and leading your life in your way. So thank you so much, Dani. An absolute pleasure. And I can't wait to see you again soon.
I can't wait. Thanks for having me, Paula.
Cheers. Take care. Thank you for listening to Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. This has been the 3rd episode and final episode for a little while anyway, with our guest, who shared their pivotal moments that make them the leader they are today. Again, I talk about uniqueness a lot. Every guest story and their pivotal moments, the challenges they faced, the issues they faced over the years to get to where they are now, and how they pulled themselves through all of that, makes them the leader they are today, and each one of those stories is unique and different. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with them and see what that meant for them. Now, once again, it's your turn to reflect on what you've heard today, see what resonates for you, and think about what that might mean for your leadership moving forwards. I'm Paula Eddie Wilcox, and I look forward to welcoming you back next time on Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. Bye for now.